In towns like these, silence carries weight. What isn't said can echo louder than sirens. And in the spring of 2018, a whisper found its way into that silence. A rumor. The kind people exchange quietly in grocery store aisles, in gas station booths, or after Sunday church. That whisper had a name, and that name was a county marshal. Marshal Reed Harper had worked in law enforcement for over 20 years. He was known. He was trusted. He had handled domestic calls, drug busts, and the endless march of paperwork that small-town departments carry. But for all his service, there was one thing no one saw coming. Or perhaps they chose not to. The girl, her name was Nia Williams, 16 years old, bright, quiet, fierce when she had to be. She just finished high school, lived with her aunt. Her mother had passed away when she was 12. Her father? No one ever really asked. No one knows exactly when it started. Or maybe some did. Maybe that's why nothing was ever said out loud. But what we do know is this. On April 12th, a message was sent. A simple text. No name, no explanation, just 6 words. You need to look at Harper. The text reached a local reporter, one who had been covering election campaigns and town fairs, not investigations. But something about those words, the urgency behind them, wouldn't let go, so she followed it. And what she uncovered in the weeks to come would fracture everything the town thought it understood. About power, about secrecy, about the thin line between protection and control. This wasn't just about an affair. It wasn't just about age. It was about leverage, about choices made in the dark, and the cost those choices would demand. Every secret leaves a trace. Her name became a whisper just like the one that started it all. Nia Williams, 16. In school hallways, her smile had always seemed to mean more than it showed. Quiet, yes, but not shy. The kind of girl who carried a book everywhere. One who watched people more than she spoke. In her community, she was seen as focused, smart, respectful, someone who kept to herself. People say they never noticed anything out of the ordinary. But what does that really mean? When you live in a town where authority has a face and a title, people rarely look past the badge. She met him, they say, through a school outreach program. Local officers came in to talk about community safety, drugs, future careers. One of those smiling visits where everyone claps and goes home a little early. Reed Harper was there. That much is fact. Afterward, he offered her a ride home, said he didn't like the idea of her walking alone. That became a pattern. No one questioned it. She told her aunt they were working on a school project, a mentorship thing. Her aunt worked 2 jobs. She didn't ask many questions, not because she didn't care, but because when you're just trying to keep food on the table, silence sometimes becomes survival. The town never really noticed them together, until they did. There was a diner, off Route 4, booth in the back. She was seen there with him, more than once, different times, always late, always quiet. One waitress said they sat too close for comfort. Another said she thought it was a father-daughter thing. But one night someone took a picture. They weren't touching, but the space between them said everything. That photo never made it to the police. It made it to a high school group chat instead. Then it disappeared. A month later, Nia stopped showing up to school. The official word was that she was being homeschooled. Unofficially, no one saw her for weeks. When she came back, she looked different, tired, thinner. Her eyes didn't hold the same light. She avoided questions. Teachers noticed. One counselor wrote a note. Emotional withdrawal, possible distress, follow up. No one followed up, and Reed Harper kept wearing the badge. There were signs, small ones, but signs nonetheless. She began missing class more often, started seeing a local nurse practitioner, privately. Her aunt said it was for stomach pains. That's all Nia told her, but what she didn't say is what mattered most. The next time someone tried to check in on her, it was too late, because by then, the story had already shifted from concern to crisis. And Nia wasn't just a high school girl anymore. She was pregnant, and that changed everything. It was the kind of news that doesn't spread quickly, not because people weren't talking, but because they didn't know how. A 16-year-old girl, pregnant, the father unknown. That's what the official note said. But in a town where everyone knows everyone else, it doesn't take long for guesses to grow roots. Naya stopped going out altogether. Her books, once everywhere, stayed shelved. Her phone rarely left her hand, except when it buzzed with numbers she didn't recognize. She deleted more than she read. She trusted no one. Reed Harper kept his schedule, still in uniform, still on patrol, still walking into the diner, the gas station, the church lobby with the same nods and small talk. But his eyes moved quicker. He stayed less. He kept his back to walls more than he used to. Behind closed doors, the town buzzed. Some whispered it was just a rumor. Others said the girl was lying, that she was troubled, acting out, seeking attention. But those closest to her knew better. A former classmate recalled seeing her one afternoon behind the school gym, crying, alone. When asked what was wrong, she only said 3 words. I trusted him. A trust broken. A secret growing. Reed had stopped picking her up. He had warned her once, not in anger, but with cold, exact words. If anyone finds out, it won't just be me who pays. That stayed with her. The town's medical clinic logged an appointment under a fake name. Young girl, 16, first trimester. No father listed, no guardian present. That file was flagged, but quietly closed. Someone was protecting him, or protecting the department, or protecting the illusion of peace. Naya began journaling. Short entries, broken thoughts, half sentences. One page read, "Can you love someone who ruins you?" Another simply said, "He said this is our secret." One day, the nurse practitioner who had seen her stopped coming in. No explanation, no warning, just a note on the clinic door, personal leave. And the silence grew heavier. Because now it wasn't just a story about a marshal and a girl. It was a story about what happens when truth becomes dangerous, and how many people would rather protect a lie than face what it costs to speak it aloud. By the time autumn settled over the town, Nia's silence was no longer something people passed by. It became the background noise of the community. Reed Harper was still present, still in uniform, still part of every public space. Yet the eyes that once nodded in trust now paused with something else. Uncertainty, suspicion. But no one spoke it aloud. Nia was 7 months along. Her stomach was undeniable now. She wore jackets that hung too low and hoodies in the middle of warm days. The school counselor marked her as withdrawn, possibly depressed. Still, no formal intervention was made. Her aunt, overwhelmed and confused, started staying home more often, calling out of work, uncertain how to handle the child in her house, now visibly carrying another. In the clinic records, the baby had no father listed. That box remained empty. The notes, however, told their own story. Elevated stress levels, high blood pressure, frequent episodes of emotional distress. The kind of warnings that healthcare professionals flag, but that institutions often bury under bureaucracy. Naya kept journaling. Her entries became more fragmented, more urgent. In one entry, she described a recurring dream, a faceless man watching her from the hallway mirror. Another read simply, "This baby didn't ask for this." Meanwhile, Reed grew more distant. The calls stopped. The small, coded texts vanished. The pattern shifted. He didn't deny her. He simply vanished from her life, publicly. But behind closed doors, he was already planning. Because Nia wasn't the only one keeping records. A burner phone was traced later to a storage unit leased under a fake name. Inside, boxes of receipts, photos, a used pregnancy test. Files that pointed to someone trying to control a narrative before it escaped their hands. Around town, a few started noticing odd behavior. The nurse practitioner who first helped Nia returned briefly, silent, visibly shaken. She didn't stay long. Rumors whispered that she'd been threatened. Others said she had been paid off. No one could confirm it. The due date approached, and with it, the tension thickened. The school held an emergency meeting, off the record. Teachers were warned not to discuss Nia's situation with anyone, not even among themselves. The reason given, to avoid media interference. The baby was born quietly, just after midnight in a local birthing center outside county lines. No media, no birth announcement, no hospital registry, just a tired girl, barely 16, holding something both hers and not hers at the same time. A nurse on duty later recalled the moment. Nia held the baby girl against her chest, no tears, just silence. When asked the name, she whispered it once. Hope. But hope didn't stay. Within 24 hours, both Nia and the baby were gone. No one saw them leave. No formal discharge. No paperwork. Just an empty room. A crib that hadn't yet been used. A chair still warm. It would be days before her aunt realized she wasn't coming back. And by then, another room in another part of town was also empty. Reed Harper's house had been cleared. No forwarding address, no messages, just silence. And 2 lives missing from the world they had once been part of. The hidden baby wasn't just a child born of secrecy. She became a symbol of how far a man with power would go to protect his name, and how far a girl without it would be forced to run. Their absence wasn't just another disappearance. It was the beginning of the unraveling, and no one, not the town, not the department, not even the quiet walls of the clinic, would remain untouched by what came next. The calendar said September, but the air had already turned. Still, in that small county, nobody was prepared for the rupture that was about to crack through the surface. The silence had held for nearly a year. No one spoke of the affair openly, and for the marshal, that silence was everything. It was what kept his job intact, what kept his wife from knowing, what kept the girl tucked away in the margins of town. But silence can only stretch so far before it breaks. She had stopped returning his calls. She'd missed 2 of their hidden meetings. And when he pulled up in that old red truck near the house where she stayed, there was another car in the driveway, one he didn't recognize. He sat there, engine running, fists clenched on the wheel. He watched shadows move behind the curtains, and for the first time he realized she might be slipping away. She had someone else now, and worse, she might be telling him things. It wasn't jealousy, it was control. And control was the only thing keeping the marshal's life from unraveling. He couldn't let her speak. He couldn't risk it. Her friend noticed the shift first. The girl wasn't sleeping. She was nervous, kept looking over her shoulder, said someone had followed her home from the store, said she felt watched even in her sleep. She had written letters, sealed, unopened, left with her aunt just in case. She had spoken to a youth counselor once, not about everything, but enough. Enough to raise questions if someone ever asked, but no one did. Then came the day she missed school. Not a call, not a message, just an empty desk. Her friends assumed she was sick. The school didn't report it until the following morning. By then, she hadn't been seen in 36 hours. A neighbor claimed they saw her leave the night before. A hoodie, a duffel bag, heading toward the road that led past the gas station. Another said they heard shouting around midnight, but couldn't make out who it was. The marshal's shift log showed he was working late. Paperwork, it said, signed by a junior deputy, but no one ever saw him at the station that night. That weekend, the town held a vigil. Flyers went up. Missing posters flooded local bulletin boards. Her name echoed in whispers. Her photo aired on the 6 o'clock news. Volunteers combed the woods. Dogs were brought in. Nothing, not a trace, not a piece of clothing, not a footprint. Just empty roads and unanswered questions. The marshal didn't speak to reporters. He didn't show up at the search. He told his captain it was too personal, that he needed time, and time was what he took. But someone else was watching now. Someone had seen the girl arguing outside the Dollar Value store 2 nights before she vanished, not with a stranger, but with the marshal himself. She had been crying. He had grabbed her arm, pulled her close. She had pushed him away. That witness, afraid at first, finally spoke, quietly, to someone they trusted. And suddenly the silence was gone. A report was filed. An internal review launched. The captain was told to back off. Higher-ups were now involved. But the community, they had already drawn their lines. Some defended the marshal. Others demanded answers. But only one voice was missing. Hers, because still, she was nowhere. Her cell phone had stopped pinging 2 hours after she left home. Her social media silent. her bank account untouched. And then someone found the duffel bag, half buried in brush off a back road 3 miles from where she was last seen. Inside clothes, a notebook, a pregnancy test. Positive, it was hers, and the clock began ticking again. The test was real, the duffel bag was hers, and suddenly the case changed shape. What had once been a missing person case now carried the weight of a deeper truth. There had been a child, or there was going to be, but now there were only questions. The town buzzed quietly. Rumors whispered through back booths and church pews. People asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. Who was the father? Only a few people knew about the affair, and even fewer knew how far it had gone. But among those few, fear had taken root, because if it came out, it wouldn't just end a career, it could end much more. She had confided in a friend, just one, a classmate who remembered the day she came to school quiet, shaken, and asked for help getting to the clinic in the next town over. No one asked questions. The friend didn't even go in with her. But later that night, she told her, "I can't do it. He said he'd take care of it." Take care of what? And who was he? Investigators returned to the marshal's work records, to the station logs. They looked for overlaps, patterns, and they found them. Shifts that were altered, vehicle logs that showed miles not accounted for. Small things, until they weren't small anymore. Then the clinic report was found, a routine intake form filled in by hand. No insurance, paid in cash. The name was fake, but the handwriting was hers, and under emergency contact was a name written and then scratched out, but still readable. His. That evidence never made it to the official file. It was held back, quietly, inside a folder marked with a tag that simply read, "Pending." The district attorney requested access. Then the request was denied. A reporter caught wind, called the marshal's office for comment, got no response. Called again. This time a warning came back. Back off. But backing off was no longer an option, because the forensic test on the duffel bag came back, and it confirmed what many feared. His DNA was on the zipper, on the handle, on a sweatshirt inside. There was no more room for denial. The captain called an emergency meeting. Internal Affairs was notified. The mayor was briefed, and still the marshal said nothing. He didn't deny it, didn't acknowledge it, just went quiet. And that silence carried more weight than any statement ever could. The girl's aunt, who had once opened her home, came forward. She shared old voicemails, late-night calls, short and cryptic. One ended with the girl saying, "If anything happens to me, it's him. You know who?" They knew now. A warrant was drafted, sealed. The plan was to bring him in quietly, but by the time they reached the house, he was gone. Uniforms swarmed the area. Canines released, helicopters scanned the woods. The marshal's truck was found abandoned, keys in the ignition, engine warm. Inside the glove compartment was a birth certificate, blank, untouched, and a photo of the girl folded neatly beneath it. Written on the back were just 3 words: "I was wrong." The hunt had begun, but now it wasn't just about justice. It was about a life lost, a child never born, and a truth that could no longer be buried. The secret was out, and everything had changed. The badge no longer shielded him. The uniform, once a symbol of trust, now made him a moving target. The marshal had vanished. Roadblocks went up, borders alerted, his photo distributed across state lines. But he had years of training, decades of fieldwork. He knew every blind spot in the system he once enforced. The first false lead came 48 hours later. A convenience store clerk thought she recognized him. Surveillance footage showed a man matching his height and build buying water and a burner phone. But facial recognition failed. The man wore a mask, hat pulled low, and he used cash. The car abandoned at his cabin wasn't registered in his name. It was traced back to an impounded vehicle released 3 weeks earlier under a forged identity. In his personal safe, recovered days later, they found detailed maps, alternate license plates, and burner phones, unused. He hadn't just vanished. He had planned this. His colleagues, now part of the manhunt, faced a grim reality. They had been working alongside a man capable of deception on a level few could comprehend. Some refused to believe it. Others questioned everything. The sheriff of a neighboring county said it best. It's hard to hunt someone who helped write the rule book. A week passed, then 2, then a month. Tips poured in. A man seen sleeping in a truck in Missouri, another spotted on a hiking trail in North Carolina. Each followed, each false. Then came the note, mailed to the local paper, typed, no return address. You want justice, I wanted forgiveness. One of us was never going to get it. It was signed only with his initials. Forensics confirmed it matched an old file from a community bulletin he once posted years ago. Inside the marshal's former locker, overlooked in the initial sweep, a journal was found, mostly empty, but one page was marked. She asked if I would be there when it mattered. I said yes, I wasn't. The implications hit hard. Guilt wasn't just present, it was consuming. The town changed. People looked over their shoulders. Parents kept their kids closer. Trust shifted. The marshal's wife, estranged for years, issued a single statement. If you can hear this, turn yourself in. No one heard from him, but a retired ranger in West Virginia swore he saw someone camping in a remote forest reserve. Clean cut, alone, left no trace. By the time search crews arrived, there was only one item found. A worn U.S. Marshal badge left hanging on a branch, and beneath it, scratched into the bark. I protected her, I failed her. The chase continued. But what they were chasing was no longer just a man. It was a memory wrapped in a uniform, a ghost with a badge, and justice that remained just out of reach. There had always been whispers, but no one wanted to speak first. Not in that town. Not when the man in question had once been the law. He'd been the one they called when things went wrong. The face at the front of every press briefing, the man who stood with folded arms and said, "We will get answers." Now his name only came up in hushed tones. The diner he used to eat at closed early. The mechanic who serviced his truck stopped answering questions. And the church pew where he sat every Sunday stayed empty. But the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, because the truth had always been there. It had just been inconvenient. One teacher remembered a PTA meeting, said the girl had come in late that night, her eyes red, her step unsure. She'd said she was just tired. Another classmate recalled how she'd changed that year. Quieter, wore long sleeves in summer, flinched when the school bell rang. It wasn't proof, but it was never nothing. And now those little nothings added up. Local reporters revisited old files, statements that didn't match, a protective order that had been requested but never processed, a complaint from a neighbor dismissed without follow-up, each piece re-examined, each one suddenly glaring. The mayor held a town hall, promised accountability. Few believed him. The girl's aunt was there. She stood in the back, listened, said nothing. Afterwards, she left a photo on the courthouse steps, a picture of the girl smiling, holding a school trophy. On the back it read, she was only 16. The town couldn't escape it anymore. The lie wasn't just in what they didn't know, it was in what they chose not to see. New leadership was called for. Internal reviews launched, but none of it could change what had happened. The badge was tarnished, the girl was gone, and the man who should have protected her had become the reason they couldn't sleep at night. Trust doesn't vanish in a headline. It erodes slowly, whisper by whisper. In that town, it had finally collapsed, and now all they had left was to reckon with the truth they had buried too long, because everyone knew. They just never said it out loud, until now. The envelope arrived in early spring. No postmark, no return address. Just the name, typed in capital letters. To Karen Reversit had been nearly a year since the manhunt began, since the uniform became a ghost, and since the memory of a marshal became more than just a scandal. Karen had stopped expecting answers, but the letter in her hands carried the weight of everything she never wanted to know. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded, handwritten in black ink. "You said you wanted the truth. This is all I have left." The voice in her head filled in the rest. She recognized his handwriting instantly. There were no greetings, no excuses, just a quiet unraveling of the past. He wrote of guilt, not only for what happened, but for everything that led to it. He admitted to the relationship, to the fear, to the decision to disappear. He said he never meant to hurt her, or the girl, or the town. He called it his second cowardice. The first was loving someone he shouldn't. The second was running from what came next. He talked about the baby, how he never saw her face, how he heard her cry only once, and how he stayed away because it was the only way to keep her safe. The letter was dated 3 months prior, meaning it had sat somewhere, intentionally, until the time felt right. He wrote about being alone, about the nights in hiding, about the moments when he thought of turning himself in but didn't. He said it wasn't fear of prison. It was fear that he'd already destroyed everything that mattered. Near the bottom of the page, one line stood out. They said justice would fix this, but justice was never built for the likes of us. He signed it with his full name. No aliases, no initials, just the man who vanished. Karen turned the envelope over again and found a second sheet taped to the inside, a photograph. It was old, grainy. A man standing at a distance beside a child in a yellow dress, both looking away from the camera. On the back, a note. She laughed that day. It was the last time I remembered how to. Karen folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She didn't cry, not immediately. It came later when the sun went down. Outside, the town moved on, but inside one house, the weight of words unspoken finally settled. There were no more updates, no new leads, no further sightings, just a letter and everything it left behind.